I have responsibility for 3 titles which cover people who are very pragmatic about car buying. They visit the car market once every few years, sometimes reluctantly, right up to people who are passionate about cars and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on cars every year. So a broad bunch of people. And pretty much they are all very, very excited, very, very inquisitive about connected and autonomous vehicles. That's the good news. The good news is that they want the technology. They want it now. The bad news for a lot of people in the room is, of course, they want it for free. But that always happens. That's nervous laughter from the manufacturers you can hear. But also there's a degree of nervousness around it because people don't really know. And that's a job we have to do, one of education. And I found it very interesting, the SMMT survey that was released earlier on, 6 out of 10 people saw benefits to autonomous and connected vehicles. Somebody on Twitter told me that meant that there's still 4 out of 10 people who love driving. And that's very, very important because our readers, some people are saying we've got to differentiate between driverless cars and cars with autonomous technology. Driverless cars are what a lot of people will just describe as a cab. If you remember the film Total Recall with Johnny Cab, that's what a driverless car is. Autonomous technology are cars that can still be enjoyed. You can take advantage of the technology when you want it. But, as I was saying, people don't always understand exactly what those levels of technology are. What is stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Stopping somebody out on the street and the chances are they wouldn't know. We have a job to do to explain it. I was going to say it's not about us in the room here, it's about all the people out there that need to know about it. But more than anything, demonstrating it as well is a very big part of acceptance and of people actually wanting to tick the box or to invest in a vehicle that has this sort of technology. And when you get people into a car and you experience autonomous emergency braking, I've never known one person who hasn't said, no thanks, I don't think I'll bother with that one. So get them in the cars. It's like electric vehicles as well. No, I don't want an electric vehicle. It's not going to be much fun. Not that interested. Get them in the car. They do tend to like it. That's very important. The other thing I just want to mention briefly, a personal thing, I'd like to introduce you all, he's not here personally, to my dad. 80 years old, my mother's primary carer, relies on his car massively. Now, he's getting to the stage where he's getting a little bit arthritic, his eyesight's going. He's getting old. There's going to come a stage in the not-too-distant future where we're going to have that awkward conversation. Should you be driving anymore? And at that moment, when he can't drive, it's going to put a huge amount of stress on him, on my mother, on me, my family, and on the state to get them around, to keep them mobile. The autonomous car is the answer. I was listening to somebody on Radio 5. There was a lady who was visually impaired. She was so excited about autonomous vehicles. And somebody who hopefully was a little bit pessimistic was saying, sorry, 20 years away. And you could feel her heart sink at that moment. So the desire is there. The thing I would urge as well that's very important is we're in Westminster, is for legislators to work very, very hard with the industry to make it happen and make it happen as soon as possible, but to make it happen with clarity. The thing that is a concern is what car buyers and car owners want is a degree of simplicity. They don't want to be able to get in a car and think, well, I can drive it there autonomously, but it might not be able to drive there or this state or this country on this road or that road. There needs to be a degree of simplicity about that, and a lot of work needs to be done. But the technology seems to be there. Our readers are saying, bring it on.
Steve, thanks. To George Gillespie.
Good morning. I was going to make 3 points, 2 on the safety side and 1 on the social side. And the first one on safety is this technology really works, and Professor Newman beside me will be a great exponent of how this technology really works, but the human is still the problem. And part of the question from the Sunday Times relates to that. You've got fine when the humans in control of the vehicle, fine when the machine is completely in control, or the autonomy is in control of the vehicle. That level 3 is a genuine problem area, and I do think from a safety point of view, I agree with what Luke was saying, is that I think we might actually just leapfrog over that really challenging part. So that's one part, I think, where the human continues to be a problem in the system. And the second part of the human's a problem is in the mixed fleet. And we will have a mixed fleet for 20, 30 years. I saw some footage of World War II recently, and there were still horses and carts in Oxford Street in that. So that lasted 50 years. So those mixed fleets are really challenging. I think we will start off more in bounded situations, perhaps in inner cities, in campuses and areas like that. That's where we'll start from that point of safety. The second point I'd make on safety is that if we think about the vehicles today, the Achilles heel of today's vehicle has probably for the last 30, 40 years been the exhaust emissions, been the pollutants that come out of the vehicle, and I think we'll deal with that through electrification. The Achilles heel of a connected and autonomous vehicle really is the electronic and the cybersecurity of a connected vehicle. And that, I think, is a problem. We deal with cybersecurity on a national and corporate level. We're all used to it now. And we will deal with it in connected autonomous vehicles, but we will not solve it. We will only manage that situation. That is an ever-evolving challenge. And in terms of safety, that's something I think the public will be very aware of, particularly as incidents might grow. So the ability to deal with that, and it will be an ability to deal, it won't be an ability to solve. So those are really two safety points I wanted to bring up. I think fundamentally these systems are massively more safe than humanly piloted vehicles. Humans are emotional creatures. You're a white van man. You look at the mixed fleet issue. There was an Uber incident last week where the human behaved somewhat erratically, and the machine couldn't quite work out what to do with it, and there was an accident. Again, it's the human was the problem, not the machine. So we've got to deal with that. And the last one was really to touch very quickly on a social side, and something I'm keen on. It was to do with beautiful cities. And it's not so much in the SMMT report, but parking and the ability to do away with parking. I don't know the stats for the UK, but in the US, there are 1 billion parking spaces. Incredible. And if you add up all the area, it adds up to, I think, 6,500 square miles, which is bigger than the state of Connecticut, dedicated to parking. And most of that's in cities. And imagine what we could do with that space, either in terms of green space, in terms of homes, in terms of retail. I think about people like Network Rail and the major supermarkets. They're sitting on massive assets now, because when we don't need to park because the vehicles will drop us off and pick us up, then great, fantastic social benefit.
And we're going to pick up on that point actually about the way all of this will change the look and feel of cities and how they're lived in later on. And we've got a mayor and plenty of people who want to kind of pick up on that. But thanks for that for the time being. Let's turn to Paul Newman.
Well, thank you very much. What to say? Well, let's start with more parents will keep their kids and more kids will keep their parents. I really believe that. I think transport is broken, and those things drive everything I've been doing for the past 20 years, really, and my sleep deprivation will speak to that. I think it's worth pulling apart a little bit what's unusual about why I think these vehicles are going to transform, not just transport, but maybe also the safety. Stick your hand up if you've had a fender bender. Come on. And some of you more, right? Okay, there's no way just 7 of you have lost concentration. That's not going to happen. Okay, you won't have fender benders through lack of concentration. There's a whole kind of fault, and you know this, that the machines just don't make. Okay, they just don't lose attention, but nor are they human. Because there will be different kinds of accidents, but far fewer. Okay, and we need to get sorted about that. We need to start communicating and thinking about what that would mean. And there's something extraordinary that maybe we don't talk about enough. And look, I'm sorry you guys had your fender benders and maybe that was an accident. And that's awful. It's always awful when metal and people get hurt. Not the same priority, but it's always a bad thing. Thing is, it's a lonely experience when you do it yourself. Yeah, you may get a better driver. You may become a better driver. You may be more attention. You may spend more attention thinking about those T-junctions and not with the phone. But when an autonomous car will have a prang or something extraordinary happens, there's a possibility now that all the cars learn from that and minimize the chances of that ever happening again. That's exactly what humans don't do. So when you start with a driving test and you passed your first day of your driving test, I mean, it took me 6 times to pass my driving test. I had the forward-backwards ambiguity thing with a test center wall that I smashed into it. And maybe it all started there. So it's personal. You can't share it. But now every new vehicle that could start to drive has the experience and the benefit of every driven mile. That's just across the planet. Yeah, so a fender bender in Copenhagen improved someone's safety in a warehouse in Cape Town that afternoon because the driving test was distributed by the insurers. So insurance is going to change beyond belief because these things don't mean anything if you can't insure it. And there's an extraordinary picture to be painted, and we're thinking about this very hard now, to think about what actually does it mean to write the code for insurance. So it's not a thing that you layer and you buy, it's actually in the software. What does that mean? Because these machines know about risk. When they make a decision to do something, they make a decision because they've done a calculation. There's a number about risk. And that's huge for insurance. So, look, I'm going to close now because I want to hear your questions, but I'm pathologically positive about what this will do. But it needs careful, thoughtful, intelligent messaging. And I think we're starting to get that right. So thank you.
Well, let's turn to the insurance and Gus Park.
I'm pathologically positive as well.
Good.
The benefits to society, both in safety and saved lives and in cost, will be absolutely huge. I don't think it'll happen overnight, and we're going to go through an interesting journey to get there. There are potholes and twists in the road along the way. As illustrated by the discussion we were just having about the level 3 stage, the interim stages, these aren't easy. These are steps that we need to go along together. We as insurers can play a really important role in facilitating the adoption of this technology in two ways. One, we can encourage consumers to take up products that have advanced safety features, and we can translate that into financial benefits for them. So there's a lot that we can do to help. However, it will not happen automatically. And if we don't get it right, insurance could turn out to be a bit of a barrier, a blocker to the adoption of this technology. The motor insurance market in particular has got a bit of a guilty secret that it's not very good at looking forward. The motor insurers typically rely very heavily on historical data. They like to look back at 3 or 4 years worth of accidents and then do their modelling and then project that forward. And they work very closely with the likes of Thatcham, who do brilliant work to help us to understand new vehicles, but ultimately that's not going to be enough for a rapidly changing world. So how do we get it right? How do we help this process through? And it has to be through collaboration. It has to be through working closely together with the automotive industry. I would encourage the automotive industry to think a bit differently about insurance. Connected vehicles, it's not that they provide an opportunity to distribute branded insurance at the point of sale. It's not that they give you an opportunity to monetize data, although they clearly do. It's that they give an opportunity to create value for your customers. And we as insurers, if we work closely with you, if you share data and share insight, we can help translate that insight into value for customers and then smooth the path of the adoption of all of this technology. So very excited about the future.
So I don't think there's something philosophically uncomputal about this, but I think there's a big conversation to be had about how we would like those cars to behave if they had the knowledge of what might be happening. Okay? We need to decide, do we want them to do that and how? There isn't much of a conversation about is it possible to do it? It's what would we like them to do? We may decide that we just want it to be random. I don't think we would, but we could do that. And it's an awkward conversation, but we need to be grown up about it and move forward because these things might happen. I do think, though, that the trolley problem is, and this is this moral dilemma, it's extremely rare. It's extremely rare. And whilst we must be cognizant and careful and think about it, and in the same conversation, we should say, yes, but it never gets distracted by the screaming 3-year-old in the back of the seat and you're not going to ram someone. That bit doesn't happen. And so we need to have some way to talk about both these things at the same time, in the way that we shouldn't tolerate pictures of the Terminator in the media every time we talk about robots.
Yeah. But Steve, I mean, to what extent is it on the minds of the people who read your...
I think on the extent that they don't want it to be them that it hits. I'm going to try and quote Ian Robertson again from a conversation that I had with him a while ago, and do excuse me if I've got the numbers wrong, I don't have my notes with me, but he was quoting something like 30-odd thousand road deaths in the US every year, and his view was that with autonomous vehicles completely on the road, you could cut that to 18,000. Now, the problem becomes when you say to legislators, which 18,000 do you want to kill? And somebody has to say, we're going to let computers decide. So and ultimately, Paul may disagree, but it comes to legislators to decide this is how we're going to do it. And I don't envy anybody who wants to be elected making that sort of decision. But there's no doubt that autonomous vehicles will save lives, but which lives they save is the most difficult question.
George, do you agree that it comes down, I mean, is it a computable problem, and will people accept that it's a computable problem, or is it going to be something else? Because as Paul's, I mean, never mind that you can say to people again and again and again, it is going to be safer. Nonetheless, there will be people who die in these accidents, and sometimes it will be, in quotes, the wrong person. And there is going to be a discussion. It's a salient thing, even not a common thing.
Yeah, and it's always the wrong person if it's you, regardless of the situation. So I agree with Paul. This is an incredibly difficult area, and I'm not seeing a lot of this conversation happening yet. It still has to be held in the context that there will be a massive reduction in the number of deaths and fatalities. So we are dealing with a smaller percentage. But the challenge is that we all accept humans are fallible. Yeah. We all make mistakes. We all know we make mistakes, and therefore we accept mistakes made by other humans. And but we don't accept mistakes, if that's how we perceive them, to be made by machines. What's not clear to me, and I'll be honest, is how we actually take that conversation to a reality. If I'm honest, from where I sit today.
Yeah, I mean, I think also into the narrative we should insert that these are just tools. You know, they are engineered products. There's nothing spooky. There's nothing like self-thinking about these things. They are engineered products that would admit to testing. So if something goes wrong, and you know, products always get better. The early drills were not as good as the drills that we have now. You know, things improve. They do admit to audit very well because everything's recorded. So we're in a different era there when we think about the kind of mistakes and how we can learn from these mistakes.
Well, that's interesting because that then brings us to the insurance side of it. They admit to audit. There is a trail of things that happen and things that where people should be held accountable and responsible for things. To what extent is the insurance industry kind of working in all this stuff?
Yeah, so we're obviously thinking very hard about these issues. The most important thing for us is that there is absolute clarity at any given moment about who is responsible. So that's both from a legal perspective in terms of being able to establish liability. We need to know, was the car in charge or was the driver in charge at any given moment? But also from a safety perspective, for exactly the same reasons people have been talking about their concerns about level 3. It's very important that a driver knows that they are responsible for the conduct of the vehicle at any given moment, and if they're not, they're not. And we don't want any kind of ambiguity in that, and we will be taking a very close interest in the protocols for in a mixed environment for the transfer from human to machine, as it were, and vice versa. I do think the kind of question about who to kill is interesting. Who to save, sorry, I should say. I think it's interesting, but
You're an insurer.
Oh, my word.
I think it possibly disguises a bigger and more difficult question, which is how many people to save. One of the big unknowns, I think, is how much risk appetite people have for the reasons that George outlined. People might have a different attitude towards mistakes made by humans versus machines. There is a deep human desire for control. It's a well-known fact that people fear flying more than they fear driving, even though it is considerably safer.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most interesting things that we will have to keep a very close eye on is as incidents happen, and they will, hopefully the machines will learn from the incidents, but things will happen. How does society react to this? How does Parliament react to this? How do regulators react to this? Do we hold our nerve and learn and continue to improve and continue to deliver the safety benefits? There is a risk that we become too restrictive in response to.
Yeah. Do you think you might, as an insurance industry, actually begin to bear down not on the drivers or the people sitting in autonomous vehicles, but actually on other drivers who've chosen not to or haven't for some other reason, that actually insurance costs at an individual level might go up for people who choose still to rely on their own assessment of risk? Well,
whether they go up or not, I think people who choose that option may not benefit so much from the potential savings they can get from. So
there will be a kind of push thing that comes from the insurance industry where costs reduce more for people who are willing to rely on it.
Absolutely. In the end, we're in a competitive market where we want to write business in the parts of the market where the claims costs will be lower, we can charge a lower premium, and the customer wins. And so absolutely, we are there to provide the incentive to consumers to choose safer technology.